I want you to think back for a second, all the way back to your school days. Remember the hallways, the classrooms? Beyond all the lessons and the grades, there were these hidden social worlds, right? Entire cultures that students build for themselves. In this explainer, we're going to go inside those worlds.
So, have you ever wondered why school can be a totally different world for different students? I mean, how can two kids sitting in the very same classroom have experiences that are poles apart? For one, it's this land of opportunity, and for the other, it's a total battleground. Well, it's a puzzle that really comes down to one powerful idea. And the key to unlocking that whole puzzle, it lies in the groups that students form. They're subcultures. You can think of them as cliques or tribes, each one with its own set of unwritten rules, its own values, and its own feelings about school itself. So, what exactly is a subculture? Well, the easiest way to think about it is like a culture within a culture. So, if the main school culture is all about, following the official rules and getting good grades, a subculture is a smaller group inside that just plays by a different set of rules. Or, in some cases, they create their own game entirely. Okay, to really get a handle on this, we're going to peel back the layers, one by one. And we're starting with what is probably one of the most powerful forces that shapes these groups: social class. Our first stop is a really famous study by a sociologist named Paul Willis. He basically went undercover and immersed himself in the world of these working class boys, who he famously called the lads. And what Willis found was pretty wild. The lads had built this entire anti-school subculture. To them, doing a schoolwork was pointless. It was for wimps. But here's the crazy part, the big twist. By rebelling so hard against the school, they basically sealed their own fate. They ended up in the exact same kind of manual labor jobs their fathers had. Their own resistance, ironically, ended up reinforcing the whole class system. So you end up with this massive split, right? On one side, you've got the lads. And for them, school is all about messing around, having a laugh, and defying the teachers. And on the other, you have the middle-class achievers who saw school as a direct path to getting ahead in life. Same building, same teachers, completely different worlds, all drawn along class lines. But rebellion isn't always about just outright rejecting everything. A more recent study found a much more subtle but still really powerful form of resistance. And it was all about style. Yeah, a sociologist named Louise Archer found that for a group of working-class girls, their identity and status had almost nothing to do with grades. Nope, it was all about having the right look, the right brands, the right makeup, the right hair. This whole Nike identity, as she called it, gave them a ton of power with their friends. But it clashed big time with the school's middle-class dress code. It set up this constant low-level war over their appearance. And this constant clash, this battle, well, sociologists have a name for it. They call it symbolic violence. It's basically when the school's main dominant culture, which is usually middle class, imposes its values and makes the girls' styles seem trashy or inferior or just wrong. They weren't being told off for their work. They were being punished for not looking the part. Okay, so we've covered class, but that's just layer one. The next piece of this puzzle, gender, carves out totally different social spaces and subcultures, all within the very same school. And a lot of the research shows this kind of classic split. Boys' subcultures like the macho lads that Mack and Gale studied, they tend to be really public. They're out there performing their masculinity in the hallways and the playground. But in contrast, Angela McRobbie found what she called a bedroom culture for girls, where friendships and identities were built in private spaces, away from the sort of constant male gaze of the school. And just when you think you've got it figured out, things get even more complicated. Because for Black girls, particularly in the British school system, researchers found that their experience was shaped by a whole other intersection of forces. Yeah, studies by sociologists like Mary Filler and Heidi Mirza found something pretty remarkable. They saw that while a lot of Black girls were dealing with negative stereotypes from teachers, they didn't just form an anti-school subculture and give up. No, they did something else. They completely rejected the teachers' negative labels while at the same time staying fiercely committed to their own success. And that right there brings us to our third and final layer, race, and how it creates these really distinct patterns of how students respond to and resist what's happening at school. So, when sociologist Tony Sewell went into a London secondary school to study Black boys, he realized pretty quickly that there wasn't just one Black subculture. It wasn't that simple. Instead, he found this whole complex spectrum of different attitudes and strategies for getting by. He actually identified 4 distinct groups. First up, you had the rebels. They were a small group, but very visible, and they fit that anti-school stereotype. But second, and this was by far the largest group, were the conformists, the guys who accepted the rules and just wanted to succeed. Then there was a tiny group of retreatists who were kind of isolated from everyone. And finally, you had the really interesting group, the innovators. These guys were pro-education, they wanted to do well, but they were anti-school. They worked hard, but kept their distance from teachers, so nobody would accuse them of being sellouts. So, okay, we've looked at class, we've looked at gender, and we've looked at race, almost like they're separate things. But here is the most important part, the real takeaway. In the real world, these forces, they don't stay in their own neat little lanes. No, they're like a massive, complex intersection where everything crashes into each other. They overlap and they combine to create every single student's unique reality. And there's a name for this complex web. Sociologists call it intersectionality. And hey, you don't have to take my word for it. Just look back at the very studies we've just been talking about. Archer's Nike Girls, that was about being working class and being female. Mirza and Fuller's work, that was all about the unique experience of being both black and a girl. And Mack and Gale's study looked at how class, gender, and ethnicity all came together to shape the lives of the boys he studied. So what does this all mean? It means the whole idea of a typical student, it's a myth. It just doesn't exist. Every single person walking through those school gates is navigating a completely different social map, one that's shaped by their own unique mix of background, gender, and ethnicity. And that kind of leaves us with one final thought to take away. I want you to think back to your own time at school, the friends you had, the groups you were in, the attitudes you had. Which of these forces were shaping your world? What subculture were you a part of?